Hello, my name is Carrie, and I work in the VSAC Resource Center. We are here to go over financial aid and managing college costs. This program is brought to you by VSAC, and VSAC helps Vermont students of all ages to save, plan, and pay for college or career training. We seek to ensure that Vermont students and families have the information, assistance, and financial aid to achieve their goals for college and beyond. I just want to have a quick acknowledgement that people watching this video may have some real concerns and may be feeling even overwhelmed by the idea of paying for college and how to go about doing so. This presentation is intended to provide a general overview about ideas and resources to pay for college, as well as the roles that you as families play and options you have. Of course, this presentation can't cover everything. We have a number of resources available on our website, and there are also videos that Federal Student Aid has available on YouTube, and families can use those as well for assistance with filling out the FAFSA, as well as learning even more about the financial aid process. But let's get started by talking about the key to success in this process. It's really communication. You want to communicate about plans. Students and parents or family members' involvement in the college search and selection process, working alongside counselors, teachers, advisors, and coming up with good college matches that meet expectations like distance, programs offered, housing if needed, as well as placement rates. Research involves finding out about the true cost of college, which includes net price, which we will talk about in a bit, and other things like acceptance of AP or IB and college credit. And while it's great when everyone's on the same page from the start, it may be likely that families and students, even other people helping them, may have different or unspoken expectations about what's going on in this process. So it's important to talk about things like whose responsibility it is to find schools to apply to, who's completing the steps in this process, and whose primary responsibility is it to come up with the funds to pay. Who's going to have what roles in this process, and to what extent can we help each other? How much can we afford? And who has veto power? Talking through these thoughts and expectations in advance can help families to focus on finding and applying to those good college matches. Doing the research helps families make informed decisions that are not only well thought out, but also hopefully financially sound. Now, I often at presentations with people in attendance will say, this is probably one of the scariest slides in our whole presentation. We just want to talk a little bit about college costs. This assumes a full-time student with a full cost of attendance, which includes not only the billable costs like tuition and fees, but also living on campus and non-billable costs such as books, supplies, and transportation. That all years figure also assumes no increases in costs from year to year. The idea here is for you to understand that the college's advertised price can be quite high. And it's also to acknowledge that what you've heard about the cost of college isn't totally exaggerated. And also that costs vary quite a bit. Every college and trade or career school has a price, and you can see how it might add up. In the cases that you're looking at, the private college, UVM, Vermont State University also include living on campus. That would be housing and meals. For CCV in the trade school, the cost listed is for a student living at home with their parents. It includes the cost of commuting, gas, for example, from home, or parking, books, supplies, and possibly some other personal expenses, but no housing costs. CCV, for example, use a higher cost of attendance than just tuition and fees and a book allowance for students living at home. Tuition and fees and books might be closer to $9,900 a year for an in-state student commuting from home. And for the trade school, the tuition fees, books, and supplies cost might be closer to just over $28,000 for a student commuting from home. But the important thing to think about is that cost of attendance, also you could maybe call that the sticker price. It gets a lot of press, but the real price that you'll want to be concerned about is what each student or family would have to pay after the financial aid is factored in. So the net price is the average of the costs first-year students had to pay in a previous year after the grants and scholarships, the free money, was applied. So now we're looking at the average net price at these same colleges. And again, this is for full-time students, so they're taking a full course load. These averages are all first year full-time students. And what we want to show you is that the cost of attendance is not what people pay on average. Again, just to remind you, net price is the cost of the college minus free money such as grants and scholarships. So these net price figures do not include student or parent loans or work study. Um, and while these are average net prices, everyone's mileage may vary. Dependent students whose families make less than $100,000 a year may be able to attend UVM tuition and fee free through the UVM Promise program. And also for families making less than 100,000 per year, CCV is tuition free through the 802 Opportunity Program. At Vermont State University, families who make less than $65,000 per year qualify for the Freedom and Unity Scholarship, which is a free tuition guarantee. And that's for regular tuition. So depending on family situation, some students and families might feel they might find out that their net price is lower. And some families may find out that their net price is actually higher because we're using averages here. But doing research to find out about programs like UVM Promise, 802 Opportunity, and the Freedom and Unity Scholarship can help students and families understand much more about the true cost of college for them. You may notice that we have a trade school listed on here, and there are a number of trade and career schools that are eligible for federal student aid. Two examples here in Vermont are the Advanced Welding Institute and O'Brien's Aveda Institute. For these types of programs, they are also eligible for federal student aid, and the aid that we'll talk about tonight will apply to those institutions. I want to remind you, though, that there are also many non-federal aid eligible programs here in Vermont that aren't eligible for federal student aid, but they are eligible for what's called the Advancement Grant from VSAC. These grants that are funded by the state of Vermont are based on a student's financial need. They don't follow the same process that we'll talk about tonight, but you'll find more information on our website, and we will talk a little bit more further on in this presentation about the Advancement Grant. So I mentioned researching colleges and college costs. The College Scorecard is a website managed by the U.S. Department of Education. It's a place to find colleges either by searching by a specific name or using a search like distance, location, degrees offered, and majors. But you can find in-depth information about admissions, graduation rates, placement, and median salaries of recent graduates, as well as average net costs for these institutions. The net cost listed on this site can also be broken down into family income bands. And then there are also links to college-specific net price calculators from this website, where a student and family can input more specific and personal information, such as grades, standardized test scores, if any, and family financial information to see the averages of what students like them had for a net price in the previous year. I need to remind you, though, for state-supported institutions, the net price listed on the College Scorecard is for in-state students only. So really works well for Vermonters looking at Vermont schools. But if you are considering looking at a school out of state and it's state-supported, you'll want to use the college's net price calculator on their website to get a better idea of what it could cost for your family. Another thing you can find on the College Scorecard is median salary information by major after graduation at each college. This is going to be really helpful because one guideline that has been recommended is that students not borrow cumulatively more than they can reasonably expect to make their first year out of college. In addition to the College Scorecard, another site you may have heard of, College Navigator, has similar information with tabs to also find information about campus safety, student demographics, as well as accreditation. So when we're talking about need-based financial aid, the responsibility for paying for college does fall to the family. And parents and students should work together to develop a plan for paying and financing, both for the short term, the first year, and the long term. Will it be 2 years? Will it be 4 years? Some common thoughts when families hear this whole the family has the primary responsibility. It doesn't necessarily mean that the family has to write a check for the entire cost of attendance at the college. Need-based financial aid will look at the family resources first, and it'll supplement but not replace what's determined to be the family financial contribution. It's also the family responsibility to meet deadlines, to file the necessary forms, to respond to requests for additional information. While school counselors, VSAC, and college financial aid staff can help you in this process, ultimately, it's the family responsible for getting this completed. And so, again, those discussion topics for students and family will be who has responsibility for keeping track of this. The student will receive the requests as part of this process, but who in the family might be responsible for replying? And how will students share that request if it's parent information that's needed? And where will you keep track of the information that you end up ultimately submitting? So let's talk a little bit about the types of financial aid that's out there. Grants are free money, and it's usually based on students' financial need. Scholarships are also free money. It's usually based on grades, a student talent or ability, like a portfolio or audition, athletics, community service. Scholarships might be awarded by a college as part of the admissions process, but there may be additional applications needed. That'll be another thing that students and parents should research. For instance, there are other scholarships that students can apply to through VSAC and in their local community. Work study, students are usually deemed eligible as part of the financial aid process to work and earn money toward their personal expenses at school. Usually work study funds are not paid toward a student's bill unless the student chooses to walk that paycheck down to student financial services. It doesn't guarantee a job or earnings. Students have to get the job and they have to work the hours to be paid. And loans, just like they sound, loans are borrowed money to help pay for education costs. They involve interest rates and repayment terms and are important to research as part of this process. So, there are financial aid applications that need to be submitted as part of this process. And a lot of this happens in the senior year of high school. And please remember that even though you may have determined a net price at your college, that's only an estimate. To be eligible for financial aid, a student must apply. And there are many applications that a student needs to fill out. The applications will serve as a starting point for colleges and agencies to identify your ability to pay. There are several applications that you'll need to complete. While some samples are shown on this slide, we'll go into a little bit more detail about each one very soon. Forms are required to be eligible for grants, some scholarships and loans, and it's important to know that every family may need something different. It is the student's responsibility to know who wants what, where, and when. Families can and should talk about who's responsible for finding out those deadlines, filing the applications on time, and responding to requests for information. I want to just note the career-focused funding application. We talked a little bit about training programs. VSAC's workforce development forgivable loans also have specific career focus. For instance, nursing, the trades, medical school are some of the examples that are listed in VSAC's scholarships book, as well as on VSAC's website. So let's talk about how and when to apply. The first step to this process is creating an account, and it's also called the FSA ID. It's your electronic signature to confirm the information is from you and is accurate. It's used for signing the FAFSA, it's used for federal student loan agreements, and it's also used as an agreement to serve and signing those agreement to serve documents for the Teach Grant if a student is eligible. The one thing parents and a high school student or even a high school junior and parent can do now to be ready for the FAFSA during the senior year is to create an account. You just need to save those usernames and passwords and remember where you're keeping them. This is something high school seniors and parents should do. And you should know that this is an instantaneous process. You should know that your FSA ID has been verified as soon as you apply. There is something called two-factor verification. It's another way that federal student aid is going to make certain your family's information secure in this process. Every time you use your FSA ID or enter with your studentaid.gov account, you'll be prompted to use that two-factor verification. It's also called elsewhere multi-factor authentication. And what this means is that after logging in using your FSA ID or account, you'll be prompted to send either a text or an email code to you, and you will verify that it is indeed to you. If a parent signed up for an FSA ID for an older child, that parent can reuse that as their student aid account to sign their younger children's FAFSAs. The parent won't need a new one, but each student does need one. Also, I just want to mention on here, we talk about using a non-school email address. Um, the student aid account and many other electronic signatures or accounts that get created during this process do require an email address. I want to remind you that many high school students in Vermont will lose their high school email addresses after they graduate. So if you don't have one already, now would be a great time to create a college-ready free email address that the student will be able to use and check for admission, financial aid, scholarship, and even job applications. The FSA ID is the first step in filing the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This form's required. It's required for institutional financial aid at some colleges. It's required for federal student aid, even for a federal loan, as well as for other aid that might be available, like the Vermont Grant. It's the main financial aid form. They're going to gather both parent and student information for students who are considered to be dependent. And the FAFSA is free. Just want to mention that at fafsa.gov. This application is required. The student is actually the FAFSA filer, and students and parents who have to put information into the FAFSA are called contributors. Right now, beta testing is happening to find bugs and squash them. So we are ready for an October 1st open date for the FAFSA for the 26-27 school year. You want to use the 26-27 version. That's the year that a senior in high school will be attending college. I tell you this because the 25-26 school year is still up and running for people who are starting school in January. And then you also want to check college deadlines and make certain to meet the earliest one. There is room for up to 20 colleges for information to receive the FAFSA. And so there should not be a problem with making certain that all schools will get this information. But you can fill out a FAFSA earlier, and if you need to add a school later, you can go into the submitted FAFSA and you can add a school and submit again. Now, I just want to mention here, some people will ask, do I have to file a FAFSA? I don't think we're going to qualify. Some colleges will ask that all of their scholarship applicants file a FAFSA to make certain that all of their aid resources have been applied for and exhausted. If the student needs or plans to take out a student loan, they've got to file a FAFSA to qualify for those. And it's always good to file a FAFSA and have it on file at the college. This way, if a special circumstance occurs, the form is already with the financial aid office at the college, and the student and the aid office can work from there on special circumstances that have happened instead of starting from scratch and having to file that FAFSA. So it's a good idea to file one, even if you think you won't qualify for a lot of aid. Let's talk about determining financial need. When you submit a FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, the SAI is something that is determined. And so what is that student aid index? This calculation is determined by Congress. And as of a couple years ago, this calculation is based on family income, parents for dependent students, a student and spouse for independent students if the student is married, family size, and they compare it to a percentage of poverty level for minimum and maximum Pell Grant eligibility. They also look at family size. And also, I mentioned that federal poverty level, and they also may be looking at parent and student assets. And it's really important to read your instructions when you're filing the FAFSA because there are a number of assets that do not get reported on the FAFSA. So make certain that you are only reporting the things that you have to report. Let's talk about another form that's available. We talk about the CSS profile. That is an extra form that students will need to find out, but it's only required by some colleges. So it's important to know which colleges do require that form. Again, you'll use the 2026, 2027 version, the year the student will attend college. That is a form that's required for colleges' institutional financial aid at the colleges that require the CSS profile. So if you want to be considered for any of that college's financial aid, you must file the profile for that school. There are earlier deadlines for early action and early decision applicants. And the profile form is filled out online. And for some colleges, families need to upload required documents to IDOC. And IDOC is short for Institutional Documentation Service. And so it's things like tax returns and things like that. For help, you want to refer to the CSS Profile FAQ page, or you can also call CSS Customer Service, and we've got a phone number on there for you. I just want to mention that the first day to apply using a FAFSA and the CSS Profile is the 1st of October. That is not a deadline. That is the first day the form is going to be available. So I just want you to understand that there is no rush to get this done on the first day. Just meet that first deadline that you have. Let's also talk about the Vermont Grant application. That is money from the state of Vermont, and it's open. The form is open to all residents in October. Again, for seniors this year, they're using the 26-27 version, this year the student will attend college. It is required for Vermont Grant aid. So even if a student receives an estimate of a Vermont grant on their financial aid notification from a college, you really need to apply for and complete the Vermont Grant application in order to receive those funds. We recommend that students do apply early. They can check their status online and make certain to complete their to-do list. We have forms online, and students can also upload documents like tax returns if they need to. I want to mention that students have to create a MyVSAC account. So again, we are talking about creating an account where you have to keep track of your username and password with VSAC, and creating a MyVSAC account. Your username is the email address you use, and you have to set up multi-factor authentication before you're able to fill out an application. I also want to mention that you can take the Vermont grant with you. So it's a need-based grant that you apply for, but you can also use the Vermont grant at in-state as well as out-of-state colleges. So let's talk for a minute about the advancement grant. If you're a Vermont resident interested in applying for a trade school and you're interested in pursuing training there, the Vermont Advancement Grant actually is available for students for short-term training at institutions that are not eligible for federal student aid. With the advancement grant, again, that will open late in the spring of 2026. So that opens a little bit later than most of our other applications. Again, students will want to use the 2026-2027 version, the year that the student will attend that training program. This grant was built to help Vermonters enhance their job skills and also to improve employability. It is funds that are based on the student's financial need. And so just like with the FAFSA and the Vermont Grant, this is determined by looking at student and parent income. With the advancement grant, you can fill out the forms that are needed online. You can also upload documents. And just like with the Vermont Degree Grant, a student has to create a MyVSAC account before they file that application. Let's talk a little bit about maximizing financial aid. I'm sure I don't have to tell you that ultimately your academic performance can have an impact on merit-based financial aid. So merit-based financial aid is normally dependent on things like the student's grades, a talent, maybe a college needing students from different geographic locations. Take advantage of opportunities. You don't have to be a valedictorian to apply for merit-based aid. Consider applying to a college or two, even where you're considered at the high end of the college admission demographic. You can find that information on the college scorecard. You can find that information on a number of college search websites. Think about colleges that would really possibly pay some money to attract a strong student like yourself. The FAFSA is a just the facts document. So if your family has extenuating circumstances that aren't collected or shown on the FAFSA, you want to communicate about those with the college financial aid offices and the Vermont Grant program at VSAC. I want to mention to you that for the class of 2026, when filing the FAFSA, they will be using and looking at the family's 2024 income. Well, you can expect that for some families, 2024 was a long time ago. And so it's entirely possible that the family will have some different circumstances. Maybe someone's income is lower, or overtime is cut, or somebody lost a job, or there was one-time income in 2024 that's not happening in 2025. Those are all things that are special circumstances that you can communicate with the financial aid offices in VSAC. And don't just research those scholarships, apply for them. Beat, don't just meet the deadlines. For instance, VSAC administers a number of scholarships that students can apply for using one unified scholarship application and the student's My VSAC account. So you want to make certain that you want to apply and you want to make sure that you complete all of the requirements for those scholarships. Let's talk about some ways to reduce costs. For some students, looking further is a way to reduce costs. For instance, there may be schools where there aren't a lot of Vermonters attending, and maybe that college will want more Vermonters to be there. You could look at Canada. Sometimes the exchange rates are pretty good. And what I can mention about Canada is that there are some Canadian schools that are eligible for VSAC grants, Vermont state grants, as well as VSAC scholarships and possibly federal student loans. Think about dual enrollment or fast forward courses, as well as early college, advanced placement, IB testing. Any of these programs where you can earn college credits are opportunities to maybe shorten your degree program. And when you're talking about reducing those costs by a semester or a year, you are really talking about saving substantial amounts of money. Some students will consider starting at a school that costs less and then transfer to a four-year college. Some students will also, if they have the opportunity, consider attending local and commuting because housing costs can be anything from housing and meals, for example, could be anything from $12,000 a year up to close to $20,000 a year. You could save substantial money that way. Also, consider service, like the Vermont National Guard, which has a scholarship, or things like AmeriCorps. I also didn't mention the NEBI tuition break. NEBI is short for New England Board of Higher Education, and they have a program that if we do not offer a major at a state institution in Vermont, you can pursue that major at a New England state institution. And instead of paying the full out-of-state tuition, you would pay a tuition break. So it's definitely worth checking out. Additionally, check out the Vermont Transfer Guarantee. The Vermont Transfer Guarantee is a partnership agreement between the Community College of Vermont and participating colleges and universities in Vermont, allowing students to transfer seamlessly at the junior level. Again, starting someplace that may cost less and then transferring to that four-year school after. Let's talk about ways to pay. We would like to probably put this into three buckets, the past income, present income, and future income. And so past income is things like savings, or if someone has a college savings plan for the student. Present income would be things like monthly payment plans at the school where you pay off what you owe in that particular school year. Families may be eligible for tax credits. We'd also lump scholarships in there as to present income. Future income is borrowing. It could be things like a Parent Plus loan, additional student loan borrowing, private loans, other borrowing options like home equity lines of credit or another option there. And then also this workforce development and career focused funding. We talked about that a little bit on a previous slide, but the Vermont forgivable loans programs that are tied to things like Vermont trades or nursing, those are great programs where students can get significant amount of funding with the agreement that they will work in Vermont for a year for each year that they've received of that forgivable loan slash scholarship. Let's talk a little bit more about ways to pay. There's a real misconception about savings, I think. I sometimes hear people heading into forms nights that are sponsored by VSAC, and I hear them say things like, "Oh, I made certain to pay all my bills and have very little in my accounts." But really, the more you save, the less you need to borrow. And for students and families, what can you add to your savings, for instance, in between filing that FAFSA and before you need to borrow for college? How much can students add to their savings through gifts or summer employment? And really, again, kind of thinking about this now and not waiting until after you've received your financial aid award notification. Now gives more time to build up that savings if you haven't had a chance yet. It is a myth that savings hurts you in the financial aid process. When we talk about the SAI, the Student Aid Index calculation, parent assets are considered generally at a rate of about 6 to 8%. So $25,000 of parental savings might impact a family contribution by $1,700 to $2,000. You might probably much rather have the 25,000 and pay 2,000 out of it rather than not have any of the money available. So just a thought worth thinking about. Another way to pay are federal loans for dependent students. And for many students, colleges will automatically award students those federal student loans as part of their financial aid notification. Regardless of the institution or the cost of the institution, there are limits to the amount of federal loans that students may borrow. And so we have those listed here with the annual eligibility and also showing the cumulative amount borrowed in federal student loans. Oh, goodness. Sorry about that. Um, I also want to mention that the maximum amount of federal student loans that a dependent undergraduate student can borrow is $31,000. So if you need a fifth year of study, it's important to remember because you could run out of federal student loan eligibility if you need extra time to complete your career. Now we're ready to go to this slide. Let's talk a little bit about student loan options. We recommend that students accept their federal loan first. They tend to have more favorable interest rates. Some of the loans can be subsidized, meaning the government will pay the interest on their loans, on the loans while the student's in school. These federal direct loans are in the student's name. And then again, you have to complete the FAFSA to be eligible for those federal loans. I want you to notice that the interest rates are quoted here for the current academic year. Next year's interest rates will be determined in 2026, probably late May or in June. And direct student loans and plus loan rates, we'll get to those in just a minute, are fixed at the rate for the year that they're awarded. So each year's loan will have their own fixed rate. Non-federal loans, often called private loans or alternative loans. VSAC is a lender. We're a nonprofit lender, and but you can find non-federal loans through credit unions, other financial institutions. They may have variable or fixed rates. VSAC's interest rates are fixed and vary based on the repayment option you choose, along with the cosigner's credit. And VSAC's lowest rate is including a 0.25% reduction in interest choosing direct pay. And for students, a cosigner is almost always required. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the coming slides. It's important to compare all the factors of all the loan types before you choose the right loan for you. A loan that works for one person may not work very well for another, so it's important to think about what works best. We're also going to talk a little bit about parent loan options. There is a federal plus loan. You'll notice that does have a higher interest rate. And again, the interest rates quoted here for the current academic year. Interest rates get set later the same way that the federal loans do and the same way that the student loans do. Parents, as of next year, will have some limits as to how much they can borrow in a federal plus loan. But for the most part, for non-federal loans, the only limit is the cost of the school minus the financial aid offered. And the plus loan is not necessarily based on your ability to pay, whereas the other loans would be. And again, I want to mention it's important to compare all those factors of all the loan types before you choose the right one for you. VSAC has a My Education Loans Guide, which is a great resource to look at when you are thinking about and comparing loans. I should mention to you that loans are one of the latest things that happen in this process. You heard that interest rates aren't developed or announced until May or June. Most times you cannot be filing loan applications until June of the senior year of college. Let's talk about those non-federal loans and things to consider. Student borrowers will almost always be required to have a cosigner, and at VSAC, that's true. A cosigner is equally liable for the debt. At VSAC, we also call them co-borrowers for that reason. The cosigner is expected to make payments if the student borrower does not. It is also billed monthly to the cosigner along with the borrower, and it is reported to the national credit bureaus along with the borrower. The cosigner must sign all paperwork along with the borrower for this loan. So these are really important things to consider when considering co-signing a non-federal loan for a student. Before you borrow, you really want to research and find that best rate and repayment plan for both the borrower and the cosigner. You should probably look for borrower benefits and what each loan offers, such as an interest rate reduction for auto pay, whether they allow temporary suspension of payments if you're having difficulty paying. Is there a cosigner release after a certain number of payments? Those are all questions that you can be asking as you are researching loan programs. Let's talk for a minute about some resources and calculators, okay? For instance, you can find the Federal Student Aid Calculator that is on the studentaid.gov website, and it has an SAI calculator as well as estimates of federal financial aid based on your family's information. Mappingyourfuture.org is a student loan debt to salary wizard. It's really important to think about that and how much the student will be repaying, not only after the first year, but also after 4 years cumulatively borrowing for college or 2 years borrowing for college. Coming soon, I want you to watch out for being able to compare your financial aid awards with the Award Advisor app, which will be available in Google Play and the Apple Store. Families can download this free app and use it to scan financial aid award notifications and be able to compare apples to apples, schools right next to each other to see what's being offered, how much of that is free money, how much of that is loan, and what you still need at each institution. Next steps for junior year. I'm just going to mention that VSAC has a junior year planning checklist that we have printed up for families. You may have already received this at your school counseling office, but there's a lot of tasks for current high school juniors. doing those online college searches, using college scorecard and net price calculators to get information, having those family discussions about choosing and paying, researching scholarships, and creating that free college and scholarship appropriate email address. If you have not done these things and you're in your senior year, there's still time to do them. Also, next steps for the senior year, right? You want to research those forms and deadlines, meet that earliest deadline for out of all of the schools, create studentaid.gov accounts if you haven't already, also called the FSA ID, one for the student and one, possibly two for parents. We have a worksheet that you can see at VSAC where which parent needs the information. There's also a parent wizard on the Federal Student Aid website to try to figure out which parent's information is needed on the FAFSA. Gather that family financial information. You're going to need to know about asset information, for example, so you'll want to gather that up. File the Vermont Grant application as well as the FAFSA. Remember to file and complete VSAC's Unified Scholarship application. The reason why I mentioned completing, again, after the application, there's a transcript to submit probably. There may be an essay to submit or maybe two, and there may be recommendations you need. So it's really, really important to get onto that and, again, beat that deadline rather than just meeting it. And also consider applying for other scholarships locally or through your high school or through family involvement in different organizations. We have resources on our website. We have a whole page about paying for college on the VSAC website, as well as an online parent guide to paying for college and career training. These things are available on the VSAC website. We highly recommend checking those out. And there's also financial aid forms help when you're ready to apply for financial aid. Again, a lot of this process happens during the senior year. The FAFSA, there's a 1-800 number to call. They do have evening hours available. And FAFSA and the Vermont Grant, we have a number here in Vermont where you can call VSAC between the hours of 8:30 and 4. Online, FAFSA has a chatbot, and also VSAC, our resource center, is offering virtual and in-person FAFSA help. You can check the vsac.org events link for details beginning in late September, and we will have those virtual and in-person FAFSA help meetings on our schedule through the first week of February. What I will also say is that we also help people beyond that, but we do have those formally on our website during October to February. You can also email the resource center at vsac.org to request an appointment. Also, want to recommend that education loan guide that I mentioned earlier. There's an expanded section on ways that you can try to minimize education debt. It's available on our website, and you can also order a printed copy. You can email publications@vsac.org, or we do have a publications page on our website where you can request a number of the publications that we offer. I also, though, want to mention to you that a number of these resources are available in high school counseling offices across the state. So you might want to check there first. And finally, follow VSAC on social media for more great information, to learn more about events that we'll be having, to learn more about resources, as well as additional information about this process. We are happy to help you in this process and look forward to working with you as you go through this journey of determining how to pay for college and enrolling in college and training programs.